Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 12, Episode 125. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here on this Wednesday show. Dave, good day for Pittsburgh fans as the Penguins get a huge, triple overtime thriller of a win in Game 1 against the Rangers last night, or really last morning, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. Exciting game. May the 4th be with you, Alex.
Haven't heard that one today.
Happy birthday, Debo. How about that? James Harris's birthday today on May the 4th. Yeah, it's a good day to be a Pittsburgh sports fans, right? The Pirates didn't play yesterday, did they?
No, they got rained out, I think. So we'll consider that a win.
That's a positive. All right. The Penguins won. The Steelers have a new quarterback in town, and here we go. It was an exciting game last night, though. I'm running. My nails were just starting to grow back again. I think I put an end to that last night watching all those overtimes.
Exciting show for us today. In just a little bit, we'll have Josh Carney and Jonathan Heitritter join Dave and I to talk about the Steelers draft class, get their thoughts, insights. You guys have heard us enough, so we wanted to get some new voices to get their opinions on this class. So that will happen a little bit later in the show. Dave, we'll start here with some news that came in expectedly so after Friday's podcast, or after Monday's podcast, I should say. Devin Bush's fifth-year option is not being picked up, being declined by the Steelers. Again, that move was wholly anticipated considering his struggles, the 2020 ACL tear, and the difficult season he had last year coming back from that injury. And so he'll be on a prove-it deal, or in a theoretical sense, but obviously in the last year of his rookie contract in 2022.
Yeah, what do you think of my shock face?
You got the Pikachu shock face thing going on right now.
Look, we could see this coming, right? For quite a while now, and I think the hope is at this point that he turns it around in 2022 and he forces the Steelers' hands, I don't know, into maybe a franchise tag or something, or at least a high priority to re-sign next offseason. And obviously, we saw just recently how it worked out with Terrell Edmunds and not having his fifth-year option picked up at the same time last year there, and he ended up returning to the Steelers, obviously on a uber cheap contract. It'll be a good problem to have, next March for us saying, well, what are the Steelers going to do with what's the approach are the Steelers going to take with Devin Bush? Because look, Alex, he had this kind of good season here, and it sure would be nice if the Steelers could find a way to get Devin Bush back in the fold. So that's the top end of the man. That's a good problem to have situation there, because that means he would have had a very good 2022 season. And let's face it, he would have to have. I got some breaking news here. Demonte Kazee's 1-year deal with the Steelers includes a $152,000 signing bonus and a base value just north of $1 million. So what does that mean, Alex?
That is the veteran minimum salary benefit contract?
Absolutely it is. So that is as expected. That'll come with a decreased signing bonus charge salary cap charge on top of it there. So as anticipated there, a vet benefit contract for Damontae Kazee. Back to trying to stay on point here on Devin Bush. How many times do you see things like this turn around, though? Where the guy almost forces your hand to put a franchise tag on him in this situation, coming off of not having his fifth-year option picked up. So It's a long shot, I think, but stranger things have happened, and that's kind of what you would be rooting for as a Steelers fan right now, is for the Steelers to be in a situation come March of 2023 of, man, we really want this kid back.
Sure. At least the positive here is the set of circumstances that surround Bush should put him in a better position to succeed in 2022. He'll have obviously be another year removed from the ACL. He'll have hopefully a healthier and a better defensive line playing ahead of him. He has Brian Flores on the coaching staff now, and hopefully just to get another year away from everything will do him well. So does that guarantee success? No, he'll have to play better, have to get off blocks better, make more of an impact in the pass game. All things we talked about over the last 2 years essentially. But I do think he's in an overall better set of circumstances than where he was a year ago.
All right, agreed.
I mean, the guy just gets to have an off-season workout. Last year was about training and rehabbing and getting healthy and getting your body right and trusting your knee and stuff like that. And so, again, does that mean that Bush is going to have a great 2022 season? No, it's a big prove-it year. The odds of him, turning it around, 180, probably not great, but we'll see what happens.
All right.
Dave, you did a contextualization on Pitt quarterback and a Pittsburgh Steeler, I should say, Kenny Pickett, on some of the big-time throws that he made. So do you kind of want to walk through that and talk about your takeaways of that analysis?
Yeah, look, starting to go deeper now into the tape, right? With all these draft picks, not that we didn't go deep, especially when it comes to the quarterbacks overall in this class, but starting to do some of those contextualizations that I like to do, and it's even better when you're dealing with a quarterback because you got so many throws to kind of look at there. And one of the things that I wanted to start off with is Pro Football Focus. Does qualify have a stat, what they call big time throws. And what is a big time throw? In its simplest terms, a big time throw is on the highest end of both difficulty and value. While the value is easy to see statistically, the difficulty has more to do with passes that have a lower completion percentage the further the ball is thrown down the field. Therefore, the big time throw is best described as a pass with excellent ball location and timing, generally thrown further down the field and into a tighter window. Now, in 2021, according to Pro Football Focus, Kenny Pickett had 27 such throws. Now, where is that in itself from a context standpoint? Well, I believe it tied 9th overall in the FBS in 2024 as far as total amounts of big time throws go. His big time throw rate percentage in 2021 was 5.2%, and that was outside of the top 40. So many players tied there, and I forget my high school math of how you rank, where how ties play into rankings as far as, is it 9th, is it 11th, when you have 3 players tied, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But just in general, outside of the top 40, and I believe that's out with 300 dropbacks or more is what the criteria is on those rankings there. So outside the top 40, as far as a percentage of such big time throws go, went and broke them all down as I usually like to do. Get the eyes on the TV tape of them. What stuck out? Well, probably not shocking that all of them came with him not under center. 24 in shotgun. There's some nice pistol snaps in there. That'll get Alex Kozora excited.
Hey.
3 in total of these 27, and as you probably have already seen at this point, there is some Kenny Pickett in the pistol in that Pitt offense there. So that's something that I know you've been calling for quite a while, especially in a Matt Canada offense. I have a feeling we're going to see some Kenny Pickett in the pistol there. So that's one of the things, just seeing Kenny Pickett in the pistol that kind of caught my eye. Not surprised that all 27 throws came with him not under center, because what's the word that Keith Butler likes to use, nomenclature
Nomenclature.
Right. That's my big word for today. So I
Ooh.
got that out of the way early. Ooh.
It's a good day.
Of the state of college football there. Let's see. The next thing that stuck out, 16 of his big time throws went to Jordan Addison. Probably not surprising once again, right? Best wide receiver on the team, guy that can does a good job of getting vertical there. So 16 of the 27 went to him. Next, let's see, 4 of those throws were dropped. Overall, with Addison having 2 of those. Additionally, 12 of the 27 resulted in touchdowns. Pickett did use all area of the field for his 27 throws. 17 of them went between the numbers, and that in itself was good to see. And even greater was the fact that 6 of them came between the college hash marks down the field, middle of the field. Now, obviously, the college hash marks are a little bit wider, but that gives you some sense playing it through your mind as far as location down the field. The other 10 of the 27 was a healthy mix of outside of the numbers down the field there. The average depth of target on these throws was 32.8 yards. His longest was, I think actually the data that I pulled was actually wrong on this one particular throw. They have it 45 yards against New Hampshire. I think that was actually a little bit longer than that. I actually believe that might have been 50 yards, believe it or not.
Those are air yards?
Yeah, those are air yards there. And okay. I think somebody calculated that wrong. They have it down as 45. I think the true number of that is 50. And obviously that's good to see. That might have been one of his longest air yard completions of his college career. That one there, and that was down the middle of the field. His shortest was 17 yards against Miami, and made some nice throws. One of the drawbacks I think still that you kind of see is maybe how the ball flies on some of these deeper throws. It just another thing that plays in is sort of kind of the overall arm strength with him, but location on obviously on all these balls was fantastic. Some that would probably even be considered kind of tight window throws for him. A couple of them that were even dropped were very nice throws by him. And I think a few of the shorter ones there, the one against Tennessee in particular, and I think the one against Miami shows nice out of the pocket, off script kind of stuff, if you will, on top of it there. So not a bad selection. The only, one of the other drawbacks I would say overall is just the big time throw rate for him of the 5.2%. So not in essence, not the quality. I didn't find really overly, any issues with the quality, if you will, of the big time throws outside of some of those kind of look like they might've been losing a little bit of steam deeper down the field there. I think kind of the only thing, and I'll be breaking down more of these 2020, I hope to get to today, was just, I think you'd like to see a little bit higher percentage of those overall.
You said he was top 40 and that's all
it's
FBS quarterbacks
right.
last year. Where does that rank among this draft class? Are you able to easily search how that compares to a Malik Willis versus Desmond Ridder, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, let's see here. It looks like Malik Willis led FBS in 2021 with 40, according to Pro Football Focus. Next on the list for the draft class would have been, let me see.
They have it as a percentage?
I'm sorry. They do have a percentage here.
Okay.
Bailey Zappi, 48
right.
of them for a 6.5%. Malik Willis had 40 at 11%. So,
oh wow,
yeah, double what Pickett had. Now look, this doesn't show context of who you
sure.
played and And these are just raw stats. So for everybody already typing up the hate email for me here, we're trying to add as much context for you as we can in this. 40, once again, 40 for Willis at 11%. Looks like next on the list is Carson Strong, 31 big time throws, but only a 5.6% big time throw rate. And then it looks like Kenny Pickett's next on this list as far as overall. Now, you said as far as percentages go.
Yeah,
so,
I just like because Bailey Zappi threw 1 million passes this year, so that's why his number is high, but the percentage is lower than say Malik Willis. So I like to just make that a relative number.
All right, looks like Willis at 11. Let me go down the list here. Desmond Ritter at 6.5. Zappi at 6.5. Sam Howell at 6.1. Get on down the list here. Caleb Ellaby or Carson Strong at 5.6. Caleb Ellaby, who was in this class, 5.5. And then it looks like Kenny Pickett at 5.2%.
Okay, so on the lower end, but it is just one number. You don't want to be beholden to one number.
No. It's just you ask, if you paint one side of it that this is what it is, you got to put the context in context.
Right.
Look, he had, basically it was Jordan Addison, or who else did he have? I guess I don't know if you want to use that as kind of an excuse there.
Yeah,
but
to be fair, what did Malik Willis ever at Liberty?
Right.
We couldn't name a single receiver, and Addison's one of the best receivers in college football.
So that, once again, not so much the number or the quality of the big time throws that stuck out. Let me look real quick and see if I can pull up 2020. I haven't looked at the throws individually there, and of course, I don't think PFF was tracking that. It doesn't look like back then.
Okay.
So I might not have. I've got the plays. I don't have the percentages that go along with that.
Okay. Yeah. Obviously there was still a big leap in play and performance in 2021 for Pickett. I do think that's partially because I think he had some injuries in 2020. And then, of course, the emergence of Addison. He played in 2020, but really broke out this past year. Probably boosted Pickett, but also Pickett just worked on things and got a whole lot better. So you do, we talk about the issue of him being maxed out. There's, to me, a limit on what his ceiling could be compared to other quarterbacks in his class, but I don't want to say he can't take another step because we just saw him take a giant leap in 2021 for the Panthers.
Well, the biggest wonderment about, well, really any quarterback in general, but a guy like Pickett is indeed how much maxed out is he? What areas of his game can make that yet another jump to him? Now, once again, to his credit, he made a jump during his final year at Pitt. Right. And obviously was enough to have him, in the Heisman race, and obviously Pitt to have the season that they did and all like that. Just as much tape as you have on him now at this point, you just wonder where you wonder even more about where a guy like Malik Willis, what his ceiling might be potentially be. But once again, when you go back and look at Malik Willis's floor versus Malik Willis's ceiling, there's a greater gap than what maybe a ceiling and a floor is with a guy like Kenny Pickett. You have a lot less wonderment about where Kenny Pickett is coming out of the college level.
Sure. And I had an article on Pickett yesterday that spoke highly of him and kind of the things that, on a baseline level, the Pitt did, that Matt Canada is going to want to do in terms of motions and the boot game and things like that. And also then got into just some of the pro style reads and pre-snap, diagnosis of coverage. And that's going to be really important for him. And he did that, I think, on a pretty good level in terms of reading coverages overall and being able to know where to go in his progression and take a profit, hit the check down, let your guy make a play. And so those things certainly, again, the word Tomlin used was comfort, and it brought him comfort in terms of evaluating Pickett to the NFL.
All right, wait a minute here. I've got this to load now. Looks like in 2020, Matt Corral had 24 big time throws for a 7% Carson Strong had 23 for a 6.1. Malik Willis had 20 for a 7.1. Trying to find out if I can see where Kenny Pickett is here on this list.
And those overall numbers sound lower because of the 2020 season was shortened for most teams.
Let me see if I can pull him specifically real quick. Kenny Pickett had 10 big-time throws for a 2.8%.
All right. Well, you saw a big jump in both, obviously, the number and the percentage in 2021. So that's a positive sign.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, doubled it there.
More than doubled it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to continue on and looking at, it shouldn't take me long today. I think there's only 10 big time throws listed for 2020. I'll contextualize those for the people. Has anything else while we're talking about wrapping up Kenny Pickett here real quick? You did how he fits in Matt Canada's offense post. What jumped out there the most?
Yeah, I mean, nothing really jumped out because I already knew it just watching the tape. I just wanted to kind of pull some of the clips from Steelers games and obviously some of the things that Pickett did. But you talk about working under center, working play action, working the boot game, a lot of, pre-snap shifts and trades and motions and things like that. I think there's always going to be an adjustment in terms of verbiage and just the NFL playbook in itself. But I think for Pickett, going to Canada's system is going to be pretty familiar for him. So at another element of kind of the sameness, obviously him being in the same building and all those things, but having a similar playbook, a similar offense, a little West Coasty, that's going to make that transition even easier in what's still a difficult situation, but it'll be easier for Kenny Pickett.
All right, I've got some more stats here real quick that I got from a source. Kenny Pickett's tight window throws, 2021, 229 attempts, 127 completions for 1,735 yards, 19 TDs, 6 interceptions, 18 drops in that yards per attempt on those tight window throws, 7.6 yards, completion percentage, obviously 55%, an average depth of target of 13.5 on that, and working through some of these numbers here.
All right, so good info on that. Anything else on Pickett coming in future days, or was that kind of the big contextualization article on Kenny Pickett? I'm just curious.
We'll just look at different aspects, maybe some red zone red zone attempts and maybe some third down attempts, and kind of I don't want to make it where a post because when I like this tight window throw data, I mean, people aren't going to click on and going through 229
fair
attempts on those. But, if we did something maybe like, third and long type throws, red zone type throws by year with him, what's some other good, throws?
Yeah, I think even like third down red zone would be really interesting to look at.
Throws maybe outside the numbers, get a look at those. I mean, we've got a lot of weeks here and a lot of tape, at our disposal. So we'll be contextualizing several different aspects as we can kind of continue to drill him down.
Gotcha. And just one other piece of news here really quickly to talk about Steelers free agents and guys who are signing with other teams. One more off the board. Yesterday, former Steelers offensive guard Trey Turner signing a 1-year, $3 million deal with the Washington Commanders. And so the same contract he signed with Pittsburgh for the 2021 season, he'll get the same in Washington.
All right.
So that is Trey Turner. Again, no expectation he was ever going to come back, but do want to mention that he is now officially with a new team. All right, Dave, we'll take a break here and come back with Josh and Jonathan and get their thoughts on the draft. And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. And as I mentioned, we are joined by Josh Carney and Jonathan Heitritter. You heard from those guys plenty during the pre-draft process, but now that the picks are in, we wanted to hear from those guys and get their thoughts on the guys Pittsburgh actually took. You can follow Josh on Twitter @byJoshCarney and follow Jonathan on Twitter @J_Heights, HEITS. Josh, Jonathan, thanks for coming on. We'll start with Jonathan. How you doing?
Doing good, guys. Just been going hard on the film, going back on some of these guys that the Pittsburgh Steelers just recently drafted. Obviously, I've profiled a couple for the site, but trying to dive in a little bit more on the guys that I didn't specifically watch a whole lot, as well as their first round selection, Kenny Pickett, and just kind of get to know overall a lot more of his game. Because honestly, I did a lot of the quarterback profiles for the site, but Pickett was the one that I did not do. So I've been spending a lot of time the last few days since the pick has been made just to dive into all the nitty gritty and watch as much film as possible on him.
Yeah, that was our Dan Kitchen that did the outlier report on Kenny Pickett. Josh, how you doing?
I am doing wonderful. I am recharged after a very long weekend. It's a lot of fun, but I think I said Saturday night after the draft, like, holy crap, I am overwhelmed at this point. But completely recharged and kind of like Jonathan and everybody else on the site, just diving into tape. I think I've watched more Kenny Pickett in the last few days than I watched Pitt football over the last 4 years. And I find myself continuously going back to the Calvin Austin tape because, man, that is a lot of fun. I'm sure we'll talk about today.
It really is. I just want to thank you guys for all the work you've done, not only this weekend, which was phenomenal, but just the entire pre-draft process, because what we do and what we've all done, from January to before the draft really makes draft weekend easier. It's still hectic and chaotic, but it puts us in a lot better place. We had profiles on every single draft pick. And so that was important. So I want to thank you guys for all the work you guys have put in over the last several months, and of course during the very, very busy draft weekend. I just want to start with a 30,000-foot view of your thoughts on the draft class as a whole, all 7 picks. So Jonathan, I'll start with you. Just give me an overall thought and feeling about how Pittsburgh drafted.
So overall, I will say that I feel pretty good walking out of this draft class compared to other draft classes in the past. I think that in recent memory, that 2017 class with Watt and Connor and Juju Smith-Schuster and Sutton really sticks out to me as oh man, these guys really knocked it out of the park. But I would put this class just a little bit below that, maybe not at the same level, but just a little below that, but not at the same kind of level as say draft classes in the past where just you were kind of questioning certain picks. I felt really good, at least through the first 4, if not 5 picks that the Steelers made. Okay, that's very sensible based off the need, based off of the connections to the player. It was one of those Blues Clues kind of things where you kind of just really tied the players together. And frankly, obviously here at Steelers Depot, we draw, personal connections to players. I mean, you guys have seen me hyping up Pickens ever since the pick was made, even before the pick was made. So for him to become a Steeler, I was just on cloud 9 at that point. But at the same time, you have to be able to, look at this objectively and say, okay, do these players make sense based off the interest that Pittsburgh has had in these players? So when you have those two things kind of come together, that's really cool to see. So overall with the Pickett selection, we'll dive into a little bit more about that. But guys that I personally drew close to in terms of Leal and Pickens, and also Austin, just seeing him at the combine, seeing him at the Senior Bowl, that's where it's just you kind of got a good feeling. It's okay, I've had my eyes on these guys a lot. I know what these guys are capable of and what they can grow to be. So that's where I was really comfortable with the class as a whole. And I feel pretty good about it here about a few days out from the actual draft.
Josh, same question to you, just overall thoughts, feelings, things you really liked, things maybe you didn't like so much about this draft class.
Yeah, I think you said it Sunday morning, there were no real surprises with this draft class. We kind of knew who they had interest in going in, aside from maybe Austin, but all the picks made a ton of sense. Just really pleased overall with the class. I wasn't a fan of a quarterback in general this year in the first round, but as you and Dave have talked about, they got their guy. They showed us conviction. Pickett was QB1 on their board, so they feel good about it. And the more I watch him, the better I feel about his fit moving forward. Pickens, obviously, that was a guy that probably should have been a first-round draft pick. I know that people keep talking about his off-the-field issues, but really their maturity issues on the field with the fight and the squirting of the water bottle. So not too worried about that. I love that they double dipped at receiver and got that guy that could take a 5-yard slant, 50 to 70 yards to the house. The late round picks, they made sense based on the interest they showed, but I thought that they could have added a safety or, a tight end or whatever, maybe an
outside
edge there.
linebacker.
Yeah. An edge there rather than, an inside linebacker who has a lot of developing to do or a second quarterback. But again, I understand why they did it, and I know why they did it with Oladokun. They didn't want to get into that UDFA market and have to compete for him. So a lot of it makes sense. I think it's one of the better drafts I've felt, kind of like Jonathan said, coming out of it. You feel a lot better about it compared to maybe some other drafts in the past. And I think this class overall has a great chance to be very productive right away.
Well, let's start with the headliner. Obviously, the first round pick, the man that will define and pass-fail this entire draft class in the last chapter of Kevin Colbert's legacy as Steelers GM Kenny Pickett. Jonathan, I forget, and I was trying to pull it up and I couldn't find the article where you had Pickett ranked, but just overall, if you can remember where you had Pickett ranked, let us know, and then just your thoughts on him being the guy at number 20.
Yeah, so Pickett and Corral kind of floated between quarterbacks 4 and 5. So like he was it was kind of like, the top three. Like I had Howell and Ritter above, and then I had kind of Corral and Pickett in that 4 to 5 bucket. So like immediately after the selection was made, it was kind of one of those things where it's like, oh shoot, all the quarterbacks are there. Like, is this the time where they take Malik Willis? Because we were all like really enamored with the upside and the physical talent that he possessed. And then, when the pick was made, you immediately kind of felt that wind kind of go out your sails a little bit. It was like, oh man, he was available. But then the second that you kind of sat and you processed it, even before the press conference came on after the pick, you're like, this makes a lot of sense based off of how the Steelers want to do things. And then when they went to the press conference and Tomlin mentions like, oh, he's a high floor kind of guy. We've seen him all the time. We've had eyes on him. We know what we're getting with him. And then Colbert's just reiterating, he was the top quarterback on our draft board. We believe in his character. We believe in his work ethic. We've seen him improve again and again and again. And then you just have a recent interview with Colbert after, I think it was on like the radio show, talking about how through the whole process, we thought Kenny was our number one guy. And we just didn't think that he was actually going to be there. It's just like, okay, this is a Pittsburgh Steelers pick. And I said from the very beginning, after going through Malik Willis's tape, it was like, if you do not think that you can develop this guy properly and build off of his traits, you should not take him, because the chances of him busting and hitting his floor are too great. Obviously, we've seen like instances with Patrick Mahomes being a really raw quarterback coming out of Texas Tech, Josh Allen being a really raw quarterback coming out of Wyoming. And they went to offensive-minded coaches that were able to sit them, develop them, and eventually put them out there to the point where they were able to achieve on those physical traits and those talents. Malik Willis is in a similar boat, but again, extremely raw. So the thing is with Pittsburgh, do they want to spend that time developing a quarterback like that? Or do they want to be able to have a guy that they feel confident can execute their system, is ready to be out there and be able to go play right away and potentially help them, make playoff pushes and, hopefully help contend in the AFC down the line here in the next year or two? And that's more along the lines of what they were looking for with Kenny Pickett, based off the fits that you've put in your recent film room on Matt Canada's offense, how Mike Tomlin talked about mobility, both as a passer and as a runner. And Kenny Pickett has shown that, maybe not to the same degree as a Malik Willis, but you just look at all those ties and look what Pittsburgh looks at with their draft picks. And even going back to guys like TJ Watt, like he wasn't projected to be like the number one edge rusher coming out in that 2017 class. But the thing they kept talking about with TJ was his growth from year to year, starting out as a tight end at Wisconsin, then going to the other side of the football, and just his growth and maturation that he showed. It matches up a little bit kind of what Pickett was seeing from, his last couple of years at Pitt to this last year that he had where he kind of broke all the records. So overall, the pick makes sense based off of who the Pittsburgh Steelers are and where they want to be, because they want to feel very confident, and they're not about taking risks unless it's a very calculated risk. And for them, they feel that Pickett best matches what they're trying to do.
You just hit on a super good analogy there with the whole Watt thing with him. And not just a couple of shows ago, Alex and I were talking about TJ Watt and his final season sack reel. Okay. And I mean, he had some sacks. It's just, when you look at in today's world, when you look at high quality sacks and pressures and all like that, it wasn't knock your socks off. All right. Now there are obviously traits there, the heavy hands that you could, that immediately after the draft, Kevin Colbert said, you look at the guy, the way this guy uses his hands and all, there was, you could see potential room to develop maybe on that end, because A, he was getting to the passer, B, he was using his hands, but there was still, you knew where the kind of the floor was with him though, and the floor was kind of high. Now I think it speaks kind of volumes of why he did slip all the way down in the first. Remember, they were talking about, is Green Bay going to take him? And a lot of people for a while, there was like, there's no way a guy like Watt even falls, kind of realm there. But the Steelers, I think, when they look at guys, I am now of a firm belief, it's too bad Kevin Colbert's walking out the door. They're a firm belief of establishing a very high floor, and then looking at the ceiling to see, maybe how much growth is left in there. And they obviously thought there was a lot of growth remaining in TJ Watt, and good thing they did. And then when you look at Pickett, obviously, now Pickett's got a lot more, obviously, tape at his position than Watt did coming out there. But I think that's a good analogy just from maybe a floor aspect when it comes to a guy like TJ Watt, a late first-round draft pick, and then obviously a guy like Pickett now. The question becomes, we saw how this draft class ultimately played out. I mean, it was Kenny Pickett and those other 8 guys, I guess the question becomes is, if indeed, there was that much of a gap. And look, nobody's going to get around from the narrative that Kenny Pickett was not the most NFL-ready quarterback of this class. I'd like to hear the argument if somebody has one. But even if with him in a position that's in such a need that you obviously see at the top of the drafts year in, year out, and more than just one of them, the question then becomes, I guess overall, is why he slipped as far down as he did at 20th overall. And how much further maybe would he have fallen had the Steelers not taken him at 20th overall?
You want me to jump on that, Dave?
Either one, both of you have at it.
So I like the way we kind of all penciled it out here. It kind of seemed like it was a consensus that Carolina was kind of the first place where Kenny Pickett would go, and just the fact that, and I think I listened to Daniel Jeremiah and a couple of NFL Network guys, and it's just like the fact that Carolina Panthers had all of the tackles there, because it was going to be Kenny Pickett or it was going to be an offensive tackle, was the pick for Carolina at 6. And the fact that it went 5 defenders all in a row and Carolina had their pick of the litter, that's where they felt compelled to, okay, we have Darnold, we have these weapons, let's try and, build up the rest of the team. And I'm pretty sure a lot of the teams had kind of a hunch that these quarterbacks would fall. So say Kenny Pickett would be their number one guy, but he didn't grade as well as across the board as, say, like the Ika Makwanu that they took. And, they have the opportunity later down the line to take another quarterback if they want to, because it was the question is Pickett going to be that much of an upgrade over Darnold this year for a guy like Matt Rule who has to save his job? So that's where they wanted to make the best pick for them and it fortify that offensive line. And then they were able to nab Matt Corral later in the 3rd round. So after Carolina, you're looking at teams like Atlanta, which really didn't have any connections to Pickett, Seattle, that really didn't have any connections to Pickett, and then the Saints, who, rumors were floating out that, okay, they trade back into the 1st round, so they have 2 first-round picks, but they feel comfortable with the quarterback room that they had, and that at least having Winston or one of those guys help out. So they're going to draft players to try and win now in a frankly depleted NFC just because of all the talent that shifted to the AFC. So you're kind of connecting the dots. It's like, okay, after Pickett got past the first 10 picks, it's like, there's a really good chance that not only him, but all these other quarterbacks are going to be there at 20 overall, unless someone would jump Pittsburgh. And obviously we saw that there was no indication that any team really wanted to jump Pittsburgh for a quarterback because of the run on offensive line and wide receivers that we saw. So based off of that, Pittsburgh got their pick of the litter of Pickett at 20, had more offensive tackles gone off the board by 6 when Carolina picked. We might have saw a different pick and we might have saw Pickett go there. But because of the way things went, with 5 defenders going in the first 5 picks, was the first time in 30, 40 years. I think that's the big reason why Pickett slid that far.
All right, but within that though, regardless of who's picking where or whatever, top quarterbacks in a class don't fall. Usually some guy, some teams even not in that. and as far as Panthers taking a tackle or whatever, I mean, if you don't have a good quarterback to protect, what does it matter if you have the the top tackle in the league? I guess would be my counter to that. So I mean, I think Kevin Colbert was probably just as surprised maybe overall, and has said as much about Pickett falling. Josh, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do wonder though, if the Steelers don't grab Pickett and let's say they go defense there, they don't take a quarterback at all, how far does Pickett fall? I mean, I think there's a very good chance he falls out of the first round. So we could have seen some team early in the second move up just to get that 5th-year option. But I mean, I'm looking at the draft board here. I don't know where he comes off the board in the second round. Would it be that 40 and 41 with Seattle? I mean, obviously they went edge and running back there, but I think this says more about how the league felt about the quarterback class overall than it does anything else. I mean, obviously the Steelers had their convictions with Pickett, but the rest of the league, I mean, we saw, I think Corral didn't come off the board until 94 overall.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that shows us that the league was pretty much out on this quarterback class, and they're waiting for next year's class, which looks pretty strong on paper. But, Dave, like you said, the entire draft process, you want to see some conviction from this team. And I think we saw that, but yeah, it's a fun exercise to think about. I do think that Pickett probably falls into that middle second round range there if he's not off the board at 20, but I'm still a few days removed here, still stunned that a guy like Malik Willis with those tools fell as far as he did. And again, it shows how the league felt about this quarterback class in general, which kind of gives you some pause as a Steeler fan and a guy that, that looks at the league in general. If the rest of the league felt this low on the quarterback class, what did the Steelers see overall in Pickett? So
when you talk, the main narrative now with Pickett is ceiling. How much,
right.
how much further has Kenny Pickett peaked in some key areas? What areas have you guys seen on tape where you think maybe there's a strong chance that Kenny Pickett will keep progressing in?
I think the mental aspect, I think you talked about that on a recent pod where he's going to have to, take that next step from a mental aspect. The more reps he gets, the better understanding of what defenses are trying to do against him. That's where he's going to have to win, because I think he's so limited at this point. And I don't mean that as a knock on him. It's just the fact of the matter is he's limited physically at this point. I don't see how he's going to improve his arm strength or become more mobile or anything like that. He's going to have to win, between the years. And that's where some of the great quarterbacks separate themselves. But I don't see him making a substantial leap from an arm strength standpoint or, a mobility or anything like that. It's going to have to be, with those anticipation throws and seeing reads before they happen based off of what the look the defense is giving him pre-snap. That's where he's going to have to win. And, we saw that jump from him, from 2020 to 2021 coming back for that extra year. So there's certainly some reasons to be excited about Pickett from that perspective. But I think physically what you saw the last 4 years at Pitt is what you're going to get from Pickett.
Jonathan, where can he keep going? How can he keep progressing?
Yep. So a couple of the big knocks on Pickett coming out was the fact that he kind of gets, a little dancy feet in the pocket just because of previous history, with sacks and pressures. Yep. So he likes to try and leave the pocket early. And with that comes poor lower body mechanics, as we've talked often, when we were evaluating Malik Willis and some of the other quarterbacks in this class. So I think that overall being able to stay in the pocket, have better pocket awareness, and then also being able to throw with a better, more consistent base is going to help him in terms of overall accuracy, just because, there's some cases where he throws in the dirt or you might see a pass that's slightly behind a receiver. He gets it there, but, you'd like to have a better ball placement. So I think that's an area in terms of ball placement and overall accuracy. And yeah, going back through one of Clayton Eckert's articles while doing one of his studies while doing a film room on Pickett right now, he had the best on target percentage of any quarterback in this draft class, as well as being like the most efficient, most like accurate quarterback while in the red zone and scoring opportunities, as Alex has talked about in the past. So like, that's where, it's nice to see that coming out of this draft class, albeit not a good draft class from the sides of the league. But at the same time, I do think that he has room to grow in that area in terms of being more effective and efficient as a passer, especially when it comes to ball placement and accuracy. And then I kind of want to almost push back a little bit on the arm strength thing. Just especially doing a study now. And again, I'm not comparing the two, saying that they're 1-for-1 comparison, because everyone compared Pickett's last season at Pitt to Joe Burrow's last season, his ascension at LSU before he got drafted. I think that Burrow is definitely a better passer, definitely a better overall quarterback prospect. But you look at just the changes that the both guys saw, the relative athleticism that they have as quarterbacks, being able to move, being able to throw. And Joe Burrow coming out of LSU was not known for having a great, powerful arm either. But at the same time, when you talk to and listen to a lot of his receivers, his quarterback coach, other members of the Cincinnati Bengals staff, they said that they noticed a change from not only when he stepped foot at LSU to his rookie season at the Cincinnati, but also from year 1 to year 2, that they noticed a little bit in change in overall arm strength in terms of working with, refinement in terms of working with, say, strength conditioning staff that are able to focus more on the quarterback position in those areas where you're able to focus more specifically on arm strength than you would kind of in a basic college program. So I think that, yes, Pickett's never going to have the biggest arm. I don't think he's going to ever be able to throw like Allen or Mahomes. No chance about that. But I do think that there may be room for him to be able to say, we always make fun of like the velocity on some of his throws. It's good. It's not great. It's not the same level as, say, like Willis and the velocity that we saw in his passes. But I do think that there is room for him to see a small amount of improvement. And for him, like, that's perfect. As long as we're able to see him be able to make those throws, he might not be able to throw it 60, 70 yards like some of the other big cannon arm quarterbacks in the league. But if you're able to increase that, say, 3 to 5 yards than what he has now, I mean, that's going to really, really help his game and open up the overall playbook and what he can do at this level.
Here's the thing about Burrow, and I've been on record as saying this too. Last year, man, he surprised me with just overall. I haven't really sat there and judged the quality of the deep pass, but his completion percentage sure as hell went up on
70.4%.
On deep balls, and obviously it doesn't hurt to have Chase, beating people, and then hopefully George Pickens, the next guy we're going to talk about here, helps in that aspect here. One final kind of thought before we move on here, Alex. Where do both of you guys see right now the current gap between Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett? How far is that gap right now?
Ooh.
As is.
Oh, I don't know that there is a gap. I'm curious to hear what Jonathan says, though.
I think the big gap between Pickett and Trubisky is overall experience in terms of speed of defense at the NFL level. So I think that Trubisky has been thrown in the fire during his time in Chicago. We have the old, like, oh, he sat behind Josh Allen and learned from Brian Daboll, but, he sat for that time. So it's like he was
33 offensive snaps.
And one of them was an interception at the end of the game. So it's just like,
bad one.
And there might have been there might be some kneel downs in there.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like the last time we saw him, he was getting yanked for guys like Nick Foles, who just got cut and is now on the street. So it's just like, I do think that Trubisky does help and also fits in Matt Canada's system really well. But at the same time, I think that, this is going to be one of the most anticipated preseasons for Steelers football, at least in the last 20 years. I think you're pretty safe in saying that, where it's just like, you're going to actually see guys like, you'll probably see Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky and maybe Mason Rudolph. We'll see what happens with the roster at that point. But these guys are going to get a lot of drives, a lot of offensive possessions. So that way the coaching staff can best dictate, be like, okay, do we feel good about putting Kenny Pickett out there week 1? Or do we think that, he needs more time being able to see and be able to process the NFL game and start with Mitch Trubisky? If he struggles, then we put Pickett in. So that's where I think the speed of the game and that adjustment from the ACC to the AFC North is the biggest thing. But in terms of looking at the players, I don't think that there's a whole lot of difference in terms of the two guys. And obviously when you spend a first round pick on a quarterback that's already 24 years old, has as much experience as he has, and that they were saying that this is our guy, I mean, Mitch Trubisky's time in Pittsburgh may not be long.
Mason Rudolph going to be put in bubble wrap is what's going to happen with him.
He's getting the Dobbs treatment this year. He's sitting on the bench the whole time.
Yeah, and I don't know that they're going to trade him like everyone seems to be making the call.
I think they are. I'll bet you dollars to donuts.
Maybe late in camp if somebody goes down, but I bet you that they deal him even for something like a bag of footballs.
Bag of footballs and a 7th round draft pick come week 1 of the season. I bet you dollars to donuts. As long as everybody stays healthy, obviously.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, they've said they're going to take 4 to camp. They're going to take 4 to camp and all like that and all. But if those guys stay healthy there and they see what they want to see out of Oladokin and Pickett and Trubisky, Mason doesn't. Yeah, they'll deal Mason off, I bet.
Yeah, he might get 8 snaps a day in training camp at this point. So, no, that makes sense. But yeah, I don't think that there's a significant gap between Trubisky and Pickett. I think, athletically, physically, they're very similar. Trubisky might be a better runner overall, but I don't think there's that much of a gap right now. And I do think that there's a very good chance that Pickett could beat him out in camp. And I do think if Pickett is the number 2 heading into week 1, the calls for Pickett are going to start very quickly in Pittsburgh. So,
I'd hate to be Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah.
All right, Alex, carry us along. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, just for the record, Dave's betting dollars to donuts. That's also Mason Rudolph's trade value. It's dollars and donuts. That's what you can get for him right now. Last thing on Pickett.
What kind of donuts? We talking Krispy Kreme?
No,
or
not
what?
even the Krispy Kreme. You're getting just bottom shelf type of donuts probably
gas
right now.
station donuts.
You're getting the expired donuts right now, man.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Winn-Dixie. You guys don't know what Winn-Dixie is, do you?
Nah, you got me. I don't know.
Winn-Dixie was a southern chain of grocery stores. Pretty big chain store, like Kroger is out in certain areas and all like that. Winn-Dixie was that in the southeast part of the country.
Wasn't it also a song like Whistling Winn-Dixie, or am I making that up?
Is that a movie too? Winn-Dixie?
I don't know. I'm sorry, I got us off the path there. Alex, get us back on it.
Last thing on Pickett, and I think Jonathan's right about speed of the game, and obviously, managing things, taking care of the football. But I think one thing that'll determine, who's going to be the starter is leadership. Man, this offense needs some leaders. It's such a young group. You lose Ben. I mean, it's just total upheaval. You've added so many new offensive pieces the last 24 months. So who's going to take charge and lead this team? I think both guys, Trubisky and Pickett, are capable of that, having those leadership qualities, but who really takes command, takes charge, to me, will be one of those intangible things Mike Tomlin looks for.
Yeah, and honestly, if you look at it with Trubisky, they're coming in on the same playing field, because while Trubisky is a veteran, I mean, this is his first season in Pittsburgh, and he was sitting the bench last year in Buffalo. So, and then you have Pickett having the season that he had at Pitt, being that bona fide leader. I mean, Alex, we saw him at the Senior Bowl. You saw how well-spoken he was and everything. So it's just they're coming in on basically the same playing field on that side of things in terms of leadership, I would say.
Yeah, Trubisky's 27, Pickett's 24. I mean, they're not that far, apart in terms of the age and all those things. So let's move on, though, to one guy that either Trubisky or Pickett could be throwing to this year. That's George Pickens, the team's second-round pick out of Georgia. Jonathan and I, you did the report pre-draft on George Pickens, so I want to kind of start with your thoughts on the player Pittsburgh's getting.
Most definitely. So I think that me and Dave are kind of on the same bet, in terms of looking at the second round. I think coming on before the draft, I was give a lock of who you think the Steelers are going to take. And I said, I kind of hedged a little bit, saying it's either going to be George Pickens or Sky Moore at number 52 overall as a wide receiver. In my second to last mock, I mocked George Pickens because of all the connections that we saw, with the Georgia Pro Day, Freshman Jack taking through the workout, talking to him multiple times at the combine, just speaking about his character and stuff like that. But then at the end, I kind of got scared, thinking okay, there's Pickens and Moore. Pickens kind of fits that prototypical number 1 wide receiver build and style, whereas Moore kind of fits more of that undersized slot receiver. So I kind of hedged and thought there's a chance that Pickens would go before Moore. And, just all the connections that Moore had to the Steelers, I was okay, that's where I went with my final mock draft. It ended up being Pickens. I'm not disappointed about it one bit. I was happy with either one. And honestly, just going more into Pickens' tape now after that he has become a Steeler, after watching a lot of his games at the University of Georgia, I can't tell you how ecstatic and excited I am about this guy being in a Steelers uniform. Just watching him and just seeing his athletic, tangible traits, just as that big height, weight, speed specimen, but also being a fairly nuanced route runner for his size, his ability to catch the ball. I mean, Tyler Wise from Steelers Depot posted the fact that he had a 2.2% drop rate during his time at Georgia, which is like the lowest of this draft class. And, just his ability to win in all facets of the field, being able to work over the middle of the field, being able to make all those combative contested catches, being that red zone weapon, being able to, he has good speed, not great speed, but being able to catch the ball and be able to create after the catch on wide receiver screens, shallow crossers, slant routes, and being able to take one to the house. And watching him, it was so easy to make the comparison because they went to the same school and had a very similar body frame, but I couldn't help it in terms of making a film room comparing that of George Pickens to AJ Green. And just the similarities in style of play, the body frame, the testing, the stats in terms of obviously AJ Green had more production at Georgia because he played 3 seasons versus George Pickens being able to miss a full season. But both of them were obviously held back by quarterback play while at Georgia. It's scary when you put the film of Green next to Pickens, both in a Georgia uniform, and seeing how they play together. AJ Green being a little bit standing at 6'2" and 6'3" and 5/8, and then Pickens at 6'3" and 2/8, and then Green just being a little bit heavier and a little bit longer, but Pickens being faster coming off the ACL injury. It's just crazy seeing the athletic prowess that both these guys have. I'm not saying that necessarily Pickens is going to be the next AJ Green, but I think that you guys are all in agreement that if he doesn't tear his ACL and miss this season, there's no way he's not going to be a top 3, if not a top, a top 3 wide receiver pick in this draft class, if not the top wide receiver overall, just based off of what his ceiling is. The fact that he just turned 21 years old and is honestly just picking it up for a team that was a run first based offense that really held back what he can do. So if you have him in more of a pass attack, say what we've seen out of Pittsburgh the last few years, I think that this kid can really develop into a prototypical number 1 wide receiver that could, be the receiver number 1 for Pittsburgh for years to come.
There's a lot of meat on the bone, as Mike Tomlin
Amen.
likes
When
to
he
say.
said that, I couldn't agree more with that.
Because the plays he made, when we watched him, he was 19, 20 years old. Now he's going to be older and mentally and physically in a better place, and that's all going to, I think, hopefully progress him. Josh, in terms of year 1 for George Pickens, how do you see him fitting into this offense? Obviously, he's more of an outside receiver. You have Deontay Johnson, you have Chase Claypool. What do you think his role? What should expectations be in year 1 for Pickens?
I think they're going to move him around and kind of try and figure out on the fly where his best spot is. I think it's on the outside. And quite honestly, I think he's going to be what the Steelers hoped Chase Claypool could be, that vertical threat that can win down the field, whether it's with speed or getting up and winning those 50-50 balls. I'm not expecting a Chase Claypool rookie season with a bunch of touchdowns, and headlines, but he's going to be a guy that's going to make some plays down the field, show you that speed, show you that physicality. I think he's going to be the best blocking receiver in that room immediately, and he's going to bring some physicality on the outside. I know Tyler Wise said that in a recent podcast, just talking about Pickens in general. But I think right away, I think he's going to carve out a role kind of as that Z, and they're going to ask him to get down the field, stretch it vertically, try and make those plays down the sideline like they tried to, pigeonhole Claypool into that role the last few years. Pickens is just better at it. And I think they're going to bring him along slowly in that role and really, down the stretch, expand his route tree and expand his usage overall. But just really excited about the player. I know that everyone at Steelers Depot had kind of targeted him after the pro day, but, kind of like Jonathan, I didn't think that there was a chance he'd be on the board at 52, but kudos to Dave. Dave had him there in his final mock. So, and Dave had been saying he's going to fall. He's going to fall. And sure enough, he did. So, the Steelers get their guy. He's got all the tools. And I fully agree. If he doesn't tear his ACL last March, he's a first round wide receiver. So to get him at 52 is just incredible value.
Other than him not being route nuanced and in kind of the intricacies of being a wide receiver, the body lean in the routes and stuff like that. I mean, he already steps on toes well as enough as it is. I mean, on these curls, you can run the curls and comebacks with him right out of the chute with him because of how he gets up on those on those cornerbacks and all. But obviously, and I've said this, and Jonathan said it just a little while ago about him, the route nuance and having to just get more fluid, a better route runner overall. What is the one other main knock that is stuck out on film with George Pickens? I have one in my head. I want to see if either one of the two of you have had something come out on it.
I think the thing for me is just the ability after the catch. I don't think that there's much there with him, and maybe that's just not part of his game, but I'd like to see him kind of make that first man miss, pick up a few extra yards here and there. That's the thing that stands out to me. I know that some people, Dave, when you say that, listeners would say, "Oh, it's the maturity, it's the fighting, the squirting the water bottle things." I'm
not worried about it.
I don't.
He'll either shrink or overcome that.
Right? Yeah, I don't care about that stuff at all. But I think it's the yak ability for me. Right now, I'd like to see him be a little better after the catch.
Jonathan, that's not the thing that I had in my head, but it's a good thing that we will need to dive down into the tape on and metrics to look at the yak with him. I'll give up a little bit of yak if you're catching a football 14 yards down the field.
Yeah, that's fair.
When it comes to that, Jonathan, go ahead.
Okay, so like one of the big things that, have been pointed out when I was scouting him was his burst off the line, just being more like active and trying to attack the line of scrimmage, getting out fast out of his break once the ball is snapped. But the one thing that I kind of looked at a little bit was just being able to consistently use his hands and being able to be more physical at stacking and getting past defenders, because he makes a lot of combative catches like Chase Claypool. I do think he's more effective at stacking corners vertically than Chase Claypool was, but at the same time, standing at 6'3" and 2/8, 195, 199 pounds, I have to factor in the fact that he wasn't probably able to train the same way that he would be, say, going through the ACL rehab. So hopefully he's able to add a little bit more strength and bulk to his frame. But I do like to see him being able to get off the jam and being able to get off of physical press corners a little bit more consistently, so we don't have that issue, say, that Chase Claypool has had, just making sure that he's a jump ball specialist. I'm not saying that Pickens is that. I think you see his speed down the field a little bit more, but I do like to see him be, better with his hand usage, being able to get corners off of his frame, so that way they don't, hold him up as he's trying to get out to the top of his route or stack the corner vertically, so that way he can be able to more effectively stack DBs and get out.
That's not even one of the things that has kind of caught my attention here. And I invite both of you to look and see if I'm just too hyper focused on this. We talk about low drop rate. He catches a lot of the passes thrown his way. I mean, super low drop rate, but he double catches the football, doesn't he?
Yeah.
A lot?
Yeah. I think that's also, you have to look at it because, we could talk about hand size. I know that you often have it, especially the catches that he was asked to make at Georgia. Like, there's some of them where he is going up 10, 11 feet up in the air, and he has a defensive back all over him. So you do see a lot of double catches. And yeah, the fact of the matter is he has 8 3/4 inch hands compared to a guy like Calvin Austin that has bigger hands than him, standing at nearly 5'7". But the fact of the matter is he's able to come down with those catches.
Right. He does catch them, but he does. Yes. But the double catches, I wonder, you have that less split second there with some of these defensive backs on you and all like that. How much, it's just one of the things that caught my eye is some double catches in his tape.
Yeah. I think that's going to be something that you may see with him a little bit, just because of the physical nature, just because, the smaller the hand size, the harder it is just to suction cup. You don't have those lobster crackers like you have with James Washington. But at the same time, I do think that he is a very good catcher of the football. He has great spatial awareness and being able to contort and control his body in the air to be able to make those focused grabs. And we're just going to have to see when he transitions to the NFL level. Are we going to still see a lot of those double catches that he still manages to come down with, or is he able to secure and tuck the football away? And we'll see if that's one of Frisman Jackson's main coaching points with him going as a college player to the league.
Great body control. Yeah.
Oh, it's ridiculous. He's a ballerina out there.
All right.
Let's move on to third round pick here. DeMarvin Leal, the first defensive player taken by Pittsburgh in this draft. And again, Jonathan, I believe you did the report on Leal prior to the draft. What are the Steelers getting in him?
They are getting a very versatile defensive lineman that honestly is a very good pass rush specialist. As you guys have already noted, he runs his motor hot. He's always chasing after the ball carrier, whether as a run defender or as a pass rusher. They move him up and down the line of scrimmage at Texas A&M. I mean, you've seen him kick all the way inside, like in between the center and the guard, and you've seen him outside almost as a 7 technique at times, just playing all over the place. He has a variety of different pass rush moves. You see his hand usage really well. You see his ability to utilize and move his body. That nasty inside spin is really, really good, just being able to take advantage of tackles that try to overset him on the outside, and then he counters back inside. He also has the ability to stack and shed, as we've seen against Evan Neal against at Alabama. He stack and shed him pretty well. Just, he has good hand usage. The big knock with him, and you've made it very clear, Alex, is just his ability to set and anchor against the run. You see him get too often get pushed off of his spot when in run defense. Sometimes you might see a lack of overall urgency as a run defender, because he's a great penetrator, but oftentimes, the old Pittsburgh way was to 2-gap it, but they've gone more to that penetrating style where Tua and Heyward are allowed to get up the field, which is why I think that they were very intrigued with a guy like Leal, because you see that ability to penetrate at the line of scrimmage. It's just the fact of the matter is, he needs to get stronger. He needs to get functionally bigger in the weight room. I have a current strength conditioning coach I worked with at Florida, Bryant Harper, who's now one of the assistants at Texas A&M. And one of those things where it's just he is a phenomenal athlete, but he still just needs to work more on his body. And you saw that a little bit with his testing scores, with his overall measurements at the NFL Combine. It's just once he gets into an NFL weight room and works with the Steelers strength conditioning staff, I think that, you want him to be playing more in that. He weighed in about 282, 283 at the combine. You want him more in that 290, 295. You don't need him necessarily at 300 based on more of a stocky frame, but you do need him to get functionally stronger, being able to build that base, being able to work on that posterior chain, those glutes, those hamstrings. That way he can better sit and anchor against the run. And that way you can really see him shine possibly as a 3-down defender. Right now, he's more of a situational guy that you play in sub-package ball. And you're probably going to have Wormley play more base downs. But I do think that you're going to see him a lot often, probably more towards halfway through the middle of the regular season in terms of being that sub-package pass rusher, just because of what he can bring you as a fastball player off the edge, or, when he kicks inside and takes advantage of guards with his speed and his moves. But then I think as long as he continues to develop his body, I think that you'll eventually see him being a 3-down player in Pittsburgh.
The good news is he's only 21, and so there's still room to grow for him, physically. Josh, that was going to be my question, and Jonathan kind of touched on it at the end. Where do you see his role being in year one? Where's Leal going to play? Is he going to be in base situations? Is he more of that sub-package pass rusher? How do you think he can try to make an impact his rookie season?
I think he's going to be that sub-package, rusher, the guy that can kind of rotate in with Cam Heyward, give Heyward some blows when needed. I hope he's not playing much base. That means something went terribly wrong along the defensive line again. But I'd like to see him, get that 8 to 10 snaps a game here and there, just as that sub package guy, that guy that can use his speed and overall athleticism against those guards on the interior, shoot gaps, work his pass rush moves, really get after quarterbacks in obvious passing situations. But unless he adds that 8 to 10 pounds over the summer and shows that he can carry it well in camp, I don't really want to see him in base defense right now, because I think he will get swallowed up by tackles in the run game. We saw it on his college tape. He's good at shooting gaps and disrupting plays in the backfield when he's asked to shoot gaps, but he can't sit and anchor. And we saw him get swallowed up by guys like Charles Cross and Evan Neal in college. So I think right away his first year is kind of just going to be focused on adding some of that weight, learning how to carry it, and then really just trying to make an impact as that situational pass rusher that can give, a Heyward, or if Stephon Tuitt's back, give Tuitt some blows in those sub packages.
One thing I'm struggling with Leal, and maybe you guys can help me out. I know the book on him was, last year, 2020, he would have been a first-round pick, would have been a top guy, and then he kind of has a down season in 2021. I don't mean to box score scout here, but in 2020, the guy had 7 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks in 10 games, by the way. This past year, he increases his tackles. He has 12.5 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks, and yet his stock fell. I'm having trouble putting those things together.
Yeah.
I haven't watched enough of 2020 yet.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it was how Texas A&M asked him to play.
Right.
I mean, just going through looking at Chris Owens' tape right now, like they didn't ask DeMarvin Leal to stand up and be that edge rusher very often. That's a good question though, Alex. I mean, I thought he had a better year in 2021, but 2020 he was a consensus All-American, All SEC first team defense. I don't know why his stock fell. I think he just kind of got lost in the mix there along the defensive line. I don't think his play dropped at all, but yeah, he had more production this past year. So
significantly more production, which isn't to say all, but still.
Who did a report on him, Jonathan?
Jonathan,
yeah. So the big things that I look at, obviously being at the combine, talking to him, all that, like he came off, his personality was really good. He kind of seemed really chill, very at ease, but so that wasn't really a concern. The big thing with him was just his testing. Like for his body size and body type, you would figure the way that he looks on tape, you figured that he would test better than he actually tested out at Indianapolis. So you're kind of underwhelmed overall with the body type because we often talk about he doesn't have that prototypical height that Steelers look for in their base defensive ends. He's right on the edge of it, but he's not that 1-for-1 match that a Wormley or a Loudermilk or a Heyward. He's a little smaller than that. He's kind of that quote unquote tweener. And that's the thing that was floated around league circles. They viewed him more as a tweener. Okay, is this guy 4-3 base defensive end on the outside? Is he a guy that kicks in on a 3-4? Do you see him as a sub-package defensive tackle? The question was, what is his fit? Because that's where you prepare that you combine the testing with the measurables, okay, where's his best fit? And then also the fact that, you get a guy that's probably not a really consistent run defender at this point in time. So he's a more developmental guy. So he was getting hyped up based off of last season's tape, and his tape was good. I was really excited about him, had him pegged as probably a mid first round pick, late first round pick going into the season. Mm-hmm. And then, yes, obviously his pass rush production did improve, but you saw weaknesses with his run defense, and Texas A&M just expanded his role because the fact of the matter is they needed more guys to be out there and make plays. I did the profile on Tyree Johnson, one of the UDFAs. I also watched a little bit of Michael Clemens. I've watched a lot of players on that Texas A&M defense, but the fact of the matter is he was their number one ace in the hole, so they wanted to be able to maneuver him around. And while that benefited him in terms of pass rush production, that also showcased a little bit of his weaknesses as a run defender. So you combine that with the testing, I can kind of see why he was kind of that forgotten name, and people just kind of became numb to the name of Marvin Leal when guys like Fedarian Mathis and Devontae Wyatt weren't drawing a lot of attention going into the season. But with their team success and how they did and how they tested specifically, that's when you saw those guys jump up and Leal kind of fall to the wayside a little bit, despite the good production.
I think it's go ahead, Dave. Well, I was going to say, I think it's a fair point that he was a tweener, and what do you do with him, and how does he best win? But didn't those things exist in 2020 as well? I mean, his body type hasn't changed that much. So, but I do think the overall point you're making makes sense. Dave,
of the Steelers' top 4 draft picks this year, is he the one with the biggest gap between ceiling and floor?
That's a tough question to answer because obviously we can look at Pickens. Yeah, I would say definitely. Obviously Pickens, we know what the ceiling is, but at the same time, he's really, really raw. I would definitely agree with you that Leal's ceiling is very, very enticing, just what he can bring, but also that his floor can be very concerning in terms of what happens if he always remains a tweener and he doesn't improve his body and be able to improve against the run. So I think the disparity between ceiling and floor is well represented by that case, Dave, in terms of, yes, I think that he can be a very disruptive interior presence in the NFL should he continue to work on his body. And he has all the ability in the world to do that, being a young underclassman, having that time to develop. But at the same time, if he never achieves that, he's more of a floor player. I compared him to a guy like John Franklin Myers from the New York Jets, just because it was a 1-for-1 measurables to athletic testing, kind of a tweener kind of role. And he goes up and down the line of scrimmage. He rotates in with a lot of other defenders, and he's productive. Don't get me wrong, but it's one of those things where, with a guy like Leal and his is ceiling as a player, you'd hope that maybe he'd be a little bit more than that, because while John Franklin Myers for the Jets has been a very productive player, like he's a 2-sack guy, 3-sack guy, and then ended up having 6 sacks this last year for the Jets and got inked to a nice contract extension. But at the same time, like he was a guy that was like a 4th, 5th round pick. So you'd hope that, Leal being drafted in a similar sense, maybe he becomes a little bit more than that.
Is his floor a better pass rushing Ziggy Hood?
Yes, 100%, 100%.
Alex?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about comparisons too much. It just feels a bit of an awkward fit about where you're going to put this guy. What does he do best to win? And just the body type not being exactly the Heyward, Tuitt, Moulton. Those guys are so hard to find. I understand that, but it doesn't make the fit any cleaner.
Ziggy Hood coming out was 6027, 300 pounds. What was Leal?
Leal coming out
6037 or 283.
66. What was it? What was his 603? What?
6037, I believe.
Okay, so so another inch there. Ziggy was kind of stouter.
Yeah, I would say Ziggy was probably a little bit more stouter as a run defender, but didn't have the pass rush powers that Leal had.
Okay.
All right, let's talk about 4th round pick Calvin Austin III, the receiver from Memphis, the 2nd receiver taken by Pittsburgh. I think a really strong value pick overall and really rounds out the quality depth and potential slot help. Josh, I'll start with you. Your overall thoughts on the selection of Calvin Austin?
I love this one. It's a really nice fit in Matt Canada's system. Also, a guy I never really considered, would be a Steeler just because I thought he would go, day 2. And they didn't really show a ton of interest in him, but you watch the tape. I mean, he's not just a gadget guy. Like he's a legitimate receiver, mostly a full route tree. He's still got to kind of refine it overall, but just an easy mover, really explosive, can take a short touch the whole way to the house. Just a ton of fun to watch. Can play outside, can play inside. He played primarily outside on the boundary at Memphis, which was very surprising. But just a lot to like with this guy. They finally have that oh crap speed that Dave's been asking for, and they drafted a receiver under 5'10". So, quite the combination there. But yeah, it's just very clear what his fit is and what he can bring to this offense. And I think Matt Canada kind of sees a guy that could play the Quadri Henderson role from 2016 at Pitt, a guy that can be used on those jet sweeps, get him the football out in space, let him run after the catch. That's what this offense has been missing, those explosive plays after the catch. And that's exactly what Austin is going to bring. And it's a lot of fun to think about the possibilities with him.
Jonathan, how do you think Austin fits and could get used in this offense in year 1?
Yeah, I think he's just a guy that you just utilize matchups with, because obviously I think that Josh is on point saying that he could be what we envisioned, like Quadri Henderson and Dree Archer and all these guys. But you guys have often said in recent podcasts that, Calvin Austin's a guy that, played primarily on the outside. He has a little bit of slot exposure. So I think he's just a guy where you're going to try and utilize his speed in matchups and exploit him in different parts of the field. And just one of those things where I think Frisman Jackson, Matt Canada says, you can't double them all. So you're going to have to move receivers inside, outside. So based off the coverage looks that they get, they might have it where, Calvin Austin profiles as that prototypical slot wide receiver, work in the middle of the field, being able to stretch the seam down the middle, or being able to work quick slants, crossers, things like that. But at the same time, you have that ability to move them on the outside too. And being able to hear from a guy like Ahmad Sauce Gardner saying that Calvin Austin was the toughest wide receiver that I had to face in college, just being able to handle it, watching the film of, him getting on his toes, being able to break out of his route, and then Sauce having to consistently grab and hold him just to make sure that he didn't go the big play up top or off to the side. I think he's a guy that you utilize based off the matchups, and that, when you're doing the opponent scouting report going into the week, you'd be like, okay, we noticed that, defensive back X is, pretty slow in terms of getting out in and out of his transitions and out of his breaks, especially at the top of routes. So let's try and maneuver Austin on this guy a couple times during the game and try and take advantage of said matchups. Or say he gets pitted against like a sub-package linebacker or a safety on occasion. He's just that guy that's going to be, your chess piece that you move inside, outside. I think that's hopefully what they see down the road for him. I think he fits that gadget / slot role right away. but I think he's a piece that they're going to want to maneuver around the field just because of his abilities as a receiver more than just a gadget guy.
I've seen some people say, and Dave and I have talked about it and dismissed the idea, but I wanted to get your guys' take. Josh, I'll start with you. The comparisons, as Jonathan mentioned, to Dre Archer, to the Chris Rainey's. Do you share that concern, or do you think Austin's a different type of guy than those names?
I think he's a much different guy. I think he's a more complete receiver, more advanced at this point. You think back on Dre Archer, like he was a running back, and the Steelers, when they drafted him, they had no idea what he was. I think Alex, you had made the point, throughout camp, they were moving him around, trying to figure out what he was. Calvin Austin's a receiver. He can certainly handle some of those gadget plays, but I was really impressed with his route running overall and his ability after the catch. I think he's a well-built guy as well. He's not I don't see a Dre Archer or Chris Rainey. I kind of see more of a better version of Jakeem Grant. I know I saw a lot of people talking about movement skills, reminding them of Tyreek Hill, but Jakeem Grant is, a heck of a number 4, number 5 receiver in the league. And that's kind of what I see with Calvin Austin. So I don't see Archer. I don't see Rainey. I know that there's concerns with the size overall, but Austin's a tough player, makes a lot of contested catches as well. I don't see those concerns at all.
Don't have a ton of time left with you guys. I want to run through the rest of day 3, the selections of Connor Heyward, Mark Robinson, Chris Oladokin. Jonathan, I'll start with you. Just your overall thoughts on the final 3 selections of this draft.
Yeah, so when we got to day 3, it was one of those things where, I think we're all kind of in the mindsets like we would not be surprised one bit if Connor Heyward became a Steeler. And I think you guys reflected that sentiment that, maybe it came off a little bit early that he was drafted in the 6th round, or maybe they could have got him in the 7th. But, if teams like you talked about the Detroit Lions being very interested and Dan Campbell talking up this guy that, if teams were very interested and also have the same ideas like, oh, let's make sure that we secure him with a draft pick so that way we don't have to compete with him in free agency, the Steelers are going to be above that and be like, okay, we're going to use our 6th round pick on him rather than risking not getting him with a draft pick in the 7th round. So I think that the understanding process was there. I think everyone might have watched the pick might have been like, that's probably around early, but I understand why they did it. And frankly, it makes a lot of sense with the roles and the amount of hats that this guy can wear. I mean, I've heard you, Dave, and, Alex talking about like the different things that this guy was able to do during his time and the different ways that he was able to impact the offense and obviously the special teams as well. And just looking forward to what his overall role will be in Pittsburgh, because I mean, he's definitely a guy that you can get the ball into his hands. And it's not like he's a slouch with the ball, either as a runner or as a receiver. And I think he still needs to improve a little bit as an overall blocker, which is why I think, based off of your initial 53-man roster, Alex, that I think it's smart to have him and Watt, where Watt can be more of that traditional fullback going forward. But then you can have, Connor Heyward work in that, you made the connection to Jason Stelling, who was a backup running back for the Falcons. And I think that's a very, very good comp just because of his ability to carry and run the football, being able to be kind of a little bit of a lead blocker, still needs to improve in that a little bit, but also his ability to work as like an H-back tight end, which is where I was going to be starting a film room here shortly. I think that they're different players, but at the same time, like it's a high-end comparison. But I asked you about, the comparisons with Kyle Juszczyk being that undersized tight end coming out of Harvard, having a very similar measurables, very similar athletic profile. And who knows, maybe, facing the Ravens every year, having the opportunity to add a similar type player in Matt Canada's offense, that wants to use pre-snap motion and be able to exploit matchups. Like, I think that could be a similar way that they look to use him just as a receiver, as well as having them be that ability to be a runner as well. So I'm very excited about that selection.
I'd like to see us do two separate film rooms on him. One as kind of an offensive player, carries as a running back and obviously used in the passing game, and then a separate film room just on his blocking alone. Him, and look, we shouldn't expect him to be used much as a base tight end, but he did do a little bit of that. I think at Michigan State. I'm more curious about how he is, and I've only seen a little bit. There's only so many hours in a day to go deep diving into some of this tape here. But I'd like to see more on him as on the move as a blocker, like as an H-back, and also his blocking as a quote unquote true fullback. And how much tape is there on him as a running back, pass protecting and all, maybe in that aspect. So hopefully one of you guys can kind of deep dive that aspect of it.
Jonathan, just give me your quick thoughts on the other two picks as well, Robinson and Oladokin.
Yeah, when you saw the Mark Robinson pick come up on the screen, it was like, okay, like I mean, you've been calling this one, like they brought him in for a pre-draft visit. It makes a lot of sense, but
it was one of 25 names on Kevin Colbert's index card.
Absolutely. I mean, personally, I was sitting there, I was like, man, Penn State guy Rasheed Walker sitting there, offensive tackle. Like me and Alex were like, oh, this guy has a lot of good developmental traits. I wonder if there's some medical issue, which is why he would fall all the way down to the 7th round when we saw him more as a day 2 kind of guy, kind of tackle. But I mean, regardless, you understood why he was the pick. And, going through his film a little bit and hearing Flores talk about, his transition from running back to linebacker, how he's able to play linebacker in the SEC, like maybe he's another guy that they see kind of in that Pickens / Leal mold where it's like, he's raw. He's still learning the position. He played well in some facets, being kind of thrown in the fire right away. And hopefully maybe he's a guy that makes the practice squad and maybe somehow cuts his teeth as like the 52nd or 53rd man as a special teamer in his first season and develops into himself like that way. Because, I'm not saying it's a 1-for-1 comparison, but I know that, Dave posted clips of, Vince Williams coming out as well as like Tyler Wise as well too. And it's like not necessarily the same type of player, but very similar play style. Is just rugged, downhill, thumper, going to be good against the run game. Maybe doesn't give you a whole lot as a pass coverage guy, but maybe that's something that they see going with Robinson going forward, which is why they made that selection. And they kind of already know what they got with guys like UG3 and like guys like Marcus Allen, and they just want another kind of guy in that room. And then for Chris Oladokin, I live pretty close to South Dakota State. I have family that goes there. So being able to hear about him, seeing the ability as like kind of a dual threat quarterback, being able to create with his legs, being able to throw with some zip on the ball. We kind of talked about this, Alex, on like Twitter. It was interesting to see them go with him over a guy that they had done also research in Carson Strong, just because he had fallen all the way down there. But then again, we do know the whole history behind the knee injury. I would argue that, okay, it's this like one of the last picks in the 7th round, and those guys usually don't make the roster anyway. So why not take the chance on a guy with the arm talent that Strong has? But if they're going for that overall mobility look and, based off the construction of the roster, they added Mitch Trubisky, who's mobile. They drafted Kenny Pickett, that's mobile. Mason Rudolph has some mobility, but we don't know how for long he's going to be on this roster. And then being able to possibly add Oladokin in there, that could be that quarterback 3 / that practice squad kind of guy. Like, okay, it makes sense. They did their due diligence on him. He fits kind of like that trend that they're going for with that Matt Canada offense. So I understand the pick. Although, Dave got me on the Nevada hype train throughout the season, being able to go with Dubs and Turner and Strong and being able to talk to him. So I was kind of wish it was Strong, but I completely understand Oladokin.
I got a hat I'll sell you.
Dude, all right.
As Dave says, Viva la Air Raid.
Yeah. They've lost the coach and everything all over there. Mummy's gone.
Yeah, you're going to be a Colorado State fan now.
I am. Yeah, I'm going to have to trade this hat in for a Colorado State hat now.
Which is a team that lost us to Oladokin and the South Dakota State team week 1 this year, by the way. Josh, what was your favorite pick of the day 3 guys of the Heyward, Robinson, Oladokin? Which guy do you think has the best chance to succeed?
I think initially it was just Connor Heyward, taking a look at him, but the more and more I look at Mark Robinson, the more I kind of buy into what Brian Flores said immediately after the pick. A lot of toughness, a great work ethic, high motor. I think Mark Robinson has a chance to really stick it out for a while on this roster just based off of what he brings to the table. I know he's still incredibly raw overall, making that transition from running back to linebacker, but man, the way that this guy hits and finish tackles is really impressive. I know Flores pointed out, having that experience at running back, he maybe sees things a little quicker and better than, a long-term linebacker would see right now. So I think that transition is definitely going to help him. And I think there's a path to a role long-term here in Pittsburgh. I don't want to make the comparison to Vince Williams overall. I know that the stories are similar, the draft slots are similar, but I just think that Robinson brings that physicality from the buck linebacker position that the Steelers maybe haven't had since Williams left. I'm not projecting Robinson as a long-term starter anytime soon, but I think he can be that special teams guy that can give you some reps defensively in a pinch, kind of like that Robert Spillane trajectory. But yeah, I like Robinson. I like that ball of clay that he is. And, he doesn't have a ton of bad habits like some linebackers do coming out because he's so raw and still learning the position. So plus getting him under, Brian Flores and Jerry Olszewski is going to be a lot of fun to watch in Latrobe later this summer. But that's my favorite pick on day 3, just because I think that there is a lot to like with him if the projection lands. He's just that old school downhill thumper, and I think there's still a role for that in the league, especially in the Steelers 3-4 defense. So I do think Heyward's going to be the better player right away, if that makes sense. But I think that Robinson could stick around a little longer. But of course, this could be an old takes exposed and Robinson's cut and signs elsewhere after training camp. So,
if you miss on a 7th round pick, it's not the worst thing in the world. Pittsburgh, after the draft, signed 10 undrafted free agents. Josh, any of that group that really stick out to you? Any of the UDFAs that you really get excited about?
Mateo Durant. I started watching him Saturday night, and I was like, yep, there is a potential RB2 right there behind Najee Harris. So, I like that the Steelers didn't really spend a draft pick on a running back. I'm sure Dave does as well, kind of going the UDFA route at the position. But Durant has that home run speed. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. I haven't seen a ton from him in pass protection just because Duke asked him to do so much for that offense the last few years. But he has the experience. He has that home run ability. He has good hands out of the backfield. I really, really like him. I really like his chances of sticking on the 53 here.
Jonathan, same to you. Any undrafted free agents that caught your attention? Also, I wanted to ask you about a non-draft pick, but in addition to the roster shortly after the draft, Demonte Kazee, you did a film room on him. So just wanted to get your thoughts on the player and the potential fit for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, so I've profiled 3 UDFA so far for the site, and probably the one that stuck out the most of those 3 is probably edge Tyree Johnson out of Texas A&M. I think that, he had some pretty nice production with 8 sacks this past year for the Aggies, and his ability to win as a pass rusher. You see him have good get off the snap of the ball. Big thing is just that he kind of seems very disinterested at times as a run defender, and just his inconsistencies at times using his hands and being able to play with consistent power, kind of being more an undersized edged rusher is just one couple of his knocks, which is a reason why he kind of fell and ended up being an undrafted player. So he just needs to, show more urgency and consistency against the run, as well as be able to be more consistent with his hand usage to be able to get off blocks. But you definitely see that ability and that want to as a pass rusher, which is very intriguing as a UDFA. Another guy that I really want to get to know a little bit more, that I think it was Daniel Kitchen took the profile on Jalen Warren from Oklahoma State. He just fits that profile as that big bruising back that the Pittsburgh Steelers like, as well as has shown a little bit of pass catching chops, which is something like you like to see. Not a ton, but he definitely had a very productive season for for Oklahoma State. So he's a guy that I'd like to see going forward. Damontae Kazee. So I wanted to reach out and see if I could do his film room, just because I wanted to dive in a little bit more after the signing. So after going through his film room, I try to stay more on recent tape in 2021 with the Cowboys, but did a little bit of look at his Falcons tape as well too. He's a guy where it's just it's going to be really hard to keep him off the field. Say whatever you want about Dallas's defense, it's not great, or they give up a lot of yards. He was a 15-game starter from last year, kind of as that more split zone / single high safety. But he has shown in the past that he has played nickel corner, during his time with the Falcons. During his time, he played corner at San Diego State. So he's a very versatile defensive back where you can play him, single high, you can play him split zone, you can roll him down kind of closer in the nickel or in the dime position. So he's a guy that can maneuver around, and depending on what they want to do with Minkah, they don't have to tie him to the post anymore. They can go ahead and roll Minkah down, and they can have him play as that single high safety and not have to have Edmonds in those situations, which is going to help that defense. But just with the defensive, as well as the defensive backfield in general, you want to see guys that can make splash plays. And this is a guy in Kazee that has that ability. just with all the interceptions. He led the league in interceptions in 2018. He picked off 2 more passes last year. So he just has that knack of attacking the football. Most of his mistakes in coverage come because he's overtly aggressive and he tries to play the ball in the air. So, but again, you want to have a guy that you can say, whoa, and slow down rather than sick him. So it's just one of those things where that just needs to be reined in a little bit, depending on the coverage system and scheme that the Steelers want to use. But he's a guy that you can move in different spots, and that's going to really open up Minkah to be utilized to his full capability instead of tie him to the post because you're just afraid of getting beat over the top all the time. And for a smaller guy, like, he's probably not the same run defender as Mike Hilton, but you've profiled it really well. Like, this is a guy that, despite being quote unquote undersized, he will come and he will hit you. Like, there's a lot of good plays on tape where he's able to fill the alley, where he's able to run from sideline to sideline, where he's able to cut off guys that have the angle in the run game or on the short passing game. And he makes tackles and he will light you up. Like, there's a play where he drawed it on sportsmanlike conduct penalty against the Panthers. I think it was week 4 of the season. And, debating whether or not it was a clean hit. But yeah, like, he's forced several fumbles out throughout his career. So he's a guy that's fearless, that's opportunistic. And I think he's just going to be a breath of fresh air for a secondary in the Pittsburgh Steelers that, frankly, has been devoid of a ton of splash plays in recent years. Like, they had their one season where they racked up over 25 takeaways, which was great to see. But, guys like Cameron Sutton isn't a guy that to be a guy that's going to often play the football. Levi Wallace has shown that ability a little bit, but he isn't necessarily a quote-unquote ball hog. Akilla Witherspoon was the guy that led the team in interceptions last year. So it's just nice to add another guy and another name in the defensive backfield that can make plays for this defense.
Is he a rich man's version of Cameron Kelly?
Whatever you want to say about that. Yeah, I mean, if you want to think
you remember Cameron Kelly a few years ago?
Yeah, I remember Cameron Kelly. He doesn't have the same size, but
didn't both of them go to San Diego State too?
Yep, exactly. No, Kelly was definitely longer, but I mean, this guy has better playmaking ability, more of a consistent tackler, probably a better overall coverage defender. Like, yeah, I would say he's the Richie Rich version of Cameron Kelly.
Okay.
All right, Dave, any other final thoughts for these guys on the draft before we close things out?
No, just I look forward to reading more of these undrafted reports, and as we get deeper into off-season, kind of specialized deep dives that these guys will do on some of these players. All
right, good deal. Again, appreciate your guys' time. Jonathan, Josh, thank you guys so much.
I got one more question.
Sure.
Van Halen with David Lee Roth or Van Halen with Sammy Hagar?
Josh, I'm outdated here.
You're on your own, Dave.
I guess. How old are you, Jonathan?
I'm 25.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. That's irrelevant to you, Josh. Josh, were you a Van Halen Hagar fan, or was that even before your time?
I was an AC/DC fan. I wasn't really Van Halen. So
okay, all right.
Yeah.
You both can pick up your pink slips here pretty soon, man.
Just send me some music in the DM. I'll be able to make an educated guess next time you have me on the show.
I keep forgetting how young you pups are. All right, carry on, Alex.
On that note, we'll wrap things up again. Jonathan, Josh, thank you guys so much for your insight today, and of course, throughout this entire draft process, pre-draft and during draft weekend itself. It's really appreciated and really makes, I think, the site what the site has become. So appreciate your time, and we'll certainly talk to you guys soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Yep. Thank you for having me. I love the draft. It's one of my favorite times of the year. And honestly, I'm just excited to dive into these guys, get to know more about them, and honestly get started on 2023 just because that's how I like to roll.
And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. And again, our special thanks to Josh Carney and Jonathan Heitritter for their insight. And again, just tremendous work by the entire team. And those two guys were certainly a big part of it.
Oh, absolutely. Look, you ain't got to trust my arm to get these guys on. And that's the one beauty about this time of the year, both before and after, and having the amount of guys that we have doing this and have done it for a while. And it makes our job easier in evaluating these players too, because we can kind of lean on a lot of the reports that they do. And also it just gives you another set of eyes that you turn around and, did you see this or what am I missing here? So great sounding boards, and absolutely I love these roundtables, and they've been super popular. I know with the listeners too, because it probably gets, a bit overkill at sometimes. Well, I know it does, especially with me. Listen to us, talk about, a lot of the same players over and over again. So it is a nice kind of break and fill in to have these guys on.
Absolutely. All right, Dave, let's get to reader emails and close out today's show.
Absolutely. Let's start here with Christine Bond. Dave, outside of the 4 starting linebackers, 2 inside and 2 outside, what do you think of the depth at both positions? I think at both positions it is a stretch at best to say mediocre. Could Flores have a trick or plan up his sleeve to raise mediocre to satisfactory? So the overall linebacker room, both inside and outside, it's not where you want it to be. I mean, look, obviously you got defensive player of the year and TJ Watt in the outside linebacker room. That speaks volumes. I thought Alex Highsmith took some nice jumps in his sophomore season. You really would hope to see him go up that ladder one more notch in 2022. But what is behind them right now? And look, I was a huge Jannard Avery fan coming out, but I can't overstate enough how much I thought of him more of an off the ball linebacker than I did as an edge rusher guy. And it looks like the Steelers have him, in the edge rusher room. Maybe that's your magic piece there, that they might do something, maybe have some interesting things planned for there. As far as the inside linebacker room as a whole, I mean, Miles Jack, obviously impressive player at Jacksonville, feels like an upgrade over Schobert from last year there.
Mm-hmm.
What the heck is Devin Bush going to be in 2000? And, Devin Bush absolutely has to rebound and start becoming more of that first round kind of quality player for this team. And there are a lot of other bodies in that room. Other than that, what the heck is Buddy Johnson? Who of these guys, Spillane, UG3, Marcus Allen, the rest of that, how is that going to play out? And are you going to be able to get much comfort in any of that? So the rooms, and combining the outside linebacker room and the inside linebacker room together as we sit here today on May the 4th, it is mediocre.
Yeah, there's a lot of question marks there, and I think the microscope, the light is on Devin Bush more than probably any other player on the Steelers defense right now, in terms of needing a big season for him personally and for the health of this defense overall. And again, how much different that off-ball linebacker room could look next year, because Devin Bush is going to be a free agent. Robert Spillane, UG3, Marcus Allen, all those guys scheduled to be free agents. What happens with Miles Jack? We'll see. Buddy Johnson, it's a big year too for him. So that's a position group to really watch closely this year.
All right, let's see, from Caliber, right, saying, hi, David Knox. Awesome job again with the draft analysis. Much appreciated. 4 questions request. Can you please spend a few minutes on the podcast roasting the Pittsburgh beat writers, insiders who strongly insisted for months that the Steelers would not draft a quarterback and had very little interest in this year's draft quarterbacks? I think they deserve a little bit of heat for being so bad at their jobs. It seems like they're not being held accountable for their terrible insider info. Look, I mean, we don't want to. People know who those people are. Just follow the Blues Clues, would have led you to believe that the Steelers had interest in quarterbacks in this class and all like that. So we'll let the masses. Everybody knows who did what for the most part. Let's see. You may not be able to answer this question immediately, but the name that really sticks out in my mind from a couple of drafts ago was David Seals V. If I remember correctly, Dave, you were moderately high on that guy entering the draft. I think with an early day 3 projection, but he went undrafted and has since made no noise in the league. What do you think went wrong with that evaluation? Sorry for the weird question. Very curious on your thoughts are. Yeah, just look, sometimes you miss on these guys, and it might have been more of an I don't know. I haven't obviously. I saw his name bounce on and off like practice squad. I think maybe a 53-man roster during COVID or whatnot. So I haven't paid attention, obviously, to him too much since he did go undrafted there. But look, I'm not. Sometimes you get these evaluations wrong with these guys. You try to pick up and learn from it. I think just overall, just as a route runner. Against the competition, maybe him playing against more off coverage and all like that, really made him look a little bit better than what he was. He wasn't the most athletic specimen overall either, so that probably played into it as well. But I saw a lot of nice catches and stuff on his film. Look, Devin Tompkins with Utah State, with now with Tampa Bay. I'm really interested to see how that plays out. I knew that there was a good chance that he would go undrafted. I mean, this is a kid that didn't even get a combine invite there. So I'm interested to see how that plays out with the whole size thing. And the Steelers got one of their own now, and kind of Calvin Austin. Now, Austin's obviously probably is a giant comparable to Devin Tompkins overall there. But man, just you look at raw college film on some of these guys, and Tompkins just impressed the living daylights out of me. So I'm interested to see where that goes. Look, you're always trying to learn more and more about the evaluation process, where you made mistakes at, where to improve on, and it's a never-ending process there. One grammatical question: should Steelers Depot be Steelers or Steeler apostrophe S Depot with the apostrophe? Very silly question. No, I never intended it to have an apostrophe in there. It's always just been, Steelers Depot that way. He says, not to make this Penguins Depot, but what are your predictions for the Pens Rangers series if you haven't hit on this already? I'm just looking at it from a fan aspect here, and I acknowledge the Rangers are tough. First 10 minutes into that game last night, I thought, yeah, this series probably isn't going to last very long, especially the way the Penguins were getting plastered up against the boards there. But they won the game, and 1-0 lead's better than not having a 1-0 lead. So I don't know. I still have a funny feeling the Rangers win this series.
Yeah, I don't think this series is by any means over, and the Rangers, I think, still might be the slight favorites here. I certainly did not predict triple overtime with your backup goalie, Louis Domingue bailing you out there to win game number one. I will say, to go back to the original question about Sills, he had a broken foot at some point in 2020. So, who knows, the injury, probably played some sort of role in that. He's still with the Giants, apparently re-signed with the Giants. So he's still in the NFL. But I think receiver can be one of those tricky positions to evaluate, because there are so many talented receivers that look good in college because they're going against guys who are not going to play in the NFL. They're going against, more basic vanilla coverages. They're not seeing press coverage. I know for me personally, and this might not apply to Sills 1-to-1, but I mentioned one guy I missed on Monday's show was Denzel Mims from Baylor, that big, power forward, height, weight, speed guy. I've come to learn that the jump ball guys in college have a tougher time trying to make that jump to the NFL, because you can't always win contested in the NFL and just out-leap guys and out-muscle guys. It's too tough. The talent gap's too close in the NFL. And so I've come to learn to like the jump ball guys, like a Denzel Mims, like a Laquan Treadwell, less. And Sills might have been a bit more in that camp.
Yeah, and I think I get caught up too many times focusing too much on down the field catches than I do concentrating more on drilling down into get offs against press and man, and obviously West Virginia playing in that conference. And all, you see a lot more kind of off coverage, not as good man-to-man type. It's still Power 5, obviously, but just not the kind of quality. So you just learn to try to put less emphasis on more. And look, I am guilty as much because I have OCD and I get distracted. Sometimes I find myself tape watching and not watching the tape. Does that make sense?
No, can you explain on that?
I mean, just you get caught up in watching the actual game and the result more so than you do the intricacies of what goes into it.
I see.
I see there are several times, man, I'll throw on, if it's a TV tape specifically, if that's all I got my hands on, I get into the game. I get into watching the game. And more results. And then I find myself, and then I have to go back and go back from 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 plays before and rewatch them with the correct scouting hat on, if it makes sense. Because I am very easily distracted and can get caught up in moments and games and results more than I do sometimes in watching tape. Now mine's more of a mental disorder, just easily distracted with the ADD and all like that.
Yeah, I think that's my issue with the jump ball guys, because when you watch them in college, you're like, wow, that guy skied up. He reached over this cornerback and made this great catch. But you have to think, does that translate consistently to the NFL? And in that case, I don't think it translates as well as receivers who can separate and be a nuanced route runner that gets open. So I've used the phrase so many times and will continue to do so. My favorite receiver is an open receiver. And so the guys that can get open with a good route running ability, and that can come from different body types. It typically might be a bit smaller guy, but certainly the really advanced guys who are bigger, Devontae Adams, for example, good release packages. That's going to be something I hold in a lot more regard than the guy that can just leap over everybody else.
Tim writes in on Heyward, Connor Heyward. Connor Heyward's 2019 and 2020 rushing stats totaled 89 carries for a 3.1 average. But I know from Depot, it's all about successful runs. Did you chart those runs to know his successful run rate? No, I have not done yet. That I'm sure at one point I will drill that down. Mainly curious if a lot of the third or fourth and a lot of them are third or fourth and short conversions, or really a lack of running prowess. He says he likes the Jason Snelling comp. Any indications from Heyward's tape if he can be a lead blocking fullback, even for 5 to 10 Najee carries a game, not in the 1995 sense of it? Good question, Tim. And one of the things I'm hoping one of our guys gets to before I have to drill down into it is to see look, nobody's going to say that Connor Heyward's a full-fledged running back in the league. Now, can you give him carries in short yardage situations? I think you can. I think you can trust him in those kind of situations there. But he's not going to be a one-for-one running back two, I don't think, in this league here. I don't think that's the expectations. I am very interested, though, into deeper dives into the H-back, because the Steelers like to run a lot of that split zone. Interested to see his blocking ability as a lead fullback. Interested to see if you could throw him out there as a running back very occasionally in a third down situation and pass protect, or even on a second and long type situation. Interested to see all aspects of his tape from a blocker more so than offensive production. I've got a pretty good feel on what his offensive production is.
Yeah, I think as a blocker, remember, because he wasn't blocking until this past year. So it's underdeveloped. It needs work for sure. But I think there's an overall size in terms of a fullback, not as an inline tight end, but physicality and just desire and willingness to block that I think he can become, a pretty good blocker overall. But that's going to be the area he has to work on the most, because it's the area he was doing the least throughout his college career.
And look, you didn't just draft this guy to split out wide and using, different ways in the red zone. Obviously, he's going to have to contribute on special teams first and foremost, be a core player there, and then try to carve out some sort of role that might end up being 3 to 5 offensive snaps a game, maybe at most otherwise, right?
Right. Yeah. Again, the calling card with him will be that versatility, wearing a lot of hats and just providing good value as that, 48th guy on the game day roster, something like that.
LM writes in, thank you, David Knox, and entire Depot crew, by far the best Steelers coverage out there. He says, I love your redraft exercise. I think it reaffirms the Pickett pick. I think it's interesting to think if the top of the board broke differently, Aquanu was gone and the Panthers took Pickett. Then at 20, it really would be who would the Steelers take? He says, I would have loved Linderbaum, but when you apply your pro day criteria, he's eliminated. He then has Lewis Seen or Daxton Hill ? My thought is it really may have been their next quarterback. My thought is it really may have been their next. I don't know how the context of that. It is. We'll never know. We'll wonder forever. But I think when you do that redraft exercise, to me, it screams Pickett, Lewis Lewis Seen or Dax Hill.
Yeah, but could have been a different quarterback. I mean,
Could have. We'll never
clearly
know.
Pittsburgh, and it's the subject of my terrible take today, Pittsburgh is a lot higher on this quarterback class than the other 31 teams. So someone here is going to be really, really right, and someone's going to be really, really wrong. And I'm excited to see who it is. Hopefully Pittsburgh is coming out on top in terms of being really right about this class. I mean, Colbert said yesterday he thinks 5 quarterbacks from this class will become starters, and the rest of the NFL didn't think any of them, probably would. That's why they all fell. So it'll be interesting to see for sure. I will say, I think another quarterback, a second one, would have gone earlier had Carolina had more draft capital. They picked at 6, and the tackles all fell to them. They didn't pick again until 137. They traded back up at 94 to get Corral. So if Carolina had, say, even a second-round pick, you may have seen a quarterback go in a more conventional sense in that top end of the second round.
How surprised were you on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being very surprised? Are you or were you that Kenny Pickett was the first quarterback off the board, and not only that, at 20th overall?
Well, it was surprising. As talked about, I thought somebody would go in the top 20 just based on some of the rumors and the historical precedent of it all. So I'd probably put it at about a 7.5.
So you weren't floored that Kenny Pickett lasted to 20?
Well, as you kind of got into draft week, you heard some of the rumors about, Todd McShay talking about these quarterbacks might fall. And so you did start to wonder a little bit. But I mean, I don't know, 7.5's pretty darn surprised.
Okay. I'd put it about combining the two, it being Pickett and number 20. My surprise level is about an 8.5, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
So they got value. They got, at least in my eyes, got value from a positional standpoint there.
Sure. Yeah. Just to answer your question, had it not been Pickett, I think it would have been another quarterback. Because again, I think Pittsburgh was super high on this quarterback class.
All right, Eugene writes in, because they are currently built to not pay a quarterback and build around the most NFL-ready player on a rookie deal. That's why Baker and others don't work for this current roster, have to spend money for other positions. And that comes in the title of it, says Steelers had to draft Pickett. So I guess that's more of a comment there. Ethan Warner writes in, I'm a Steelers fan from Central Ohio, so obviously I do not follow University of Pittsburgh sports. I still thought Pickett was the best quarterback in the draft, and far and away. He reminds me a lot of Joe Burrow. He played a lot of college football, never really had a great success until the senior year, and then blew up and become the Heisman finalist in a year's work. He says, I'm not fully educated on Pitt's roster from last year, but I would imagine it was not as good of a roster as LSU with Burrow. Burrow wins with swag, and people seem to think Pickett is similar. Burrow had a tremendous senior year, but he was throwing it to Jamar and Jefferson. He says, is there something wrong in my comparison of these two guys when they were coming out of college? Because I seem to be one of the only people extremely excited about it. No, I mean, you're not. Look, just because we had him ranked where we had him ranked does not mean that we're not. How can you not be a Steelers fan and be excited about a first-round quarterback? Period. End of story. The imagination is wide open. Right now. It's just there are several people obviously extremely excited about him. Pitt fans in general, are obviously very excited about him. There are things on tape to get excited about with Kenny Pickett, let alone the fact that he was the most NFL ready quarterback to come into this. Now, as far as your comparison to Burrow, I mean, I get some of it, I guess. And yeah, Burrow had some, probably totality wise, more talent than Kenny Pickett had, right?
Yeah, I think so, but I would say two things. A, Pickett did have Jordan Addison, who's one of the top receivers in college football. That's why USC is literally giving a dump truck full of money to him, at least presumably. I don't know all the details
allegedly.
There, but allegedly, I think he's in the portal. We're not getting into that whole thing again. And also Burrow he played in the SEC, so he faced the Bamas and the top defenses as well, and Pickett didn't see quite that caliber of defense. So you could kind of flip it as well. But certainly there's been some comparisons made to Pickett in Burrow in the pre-draft process during the Senior Bowl when we had the conversation with Kenny Pickett. like 8 questions were about Joe Burrow because it was right off the Super Bowl. And so there's a lot of that vibe there. So I get that. And I understand what you're talking about from a talent standpoint, from a weapon standpoint. But again, Burrow played against top defenses that Pickett didn't quite see.
And look, when it comes to Ethan, when it comes to this quarterback class in total, I mean, just think about this entire process. I mean, how divided so many people were with their rankings and who is going to be the top of the class, and this guy. There's some good breakdowns, I think, on was it Football Outsiders or one that says there's no way Kenny Pickett will succeed at the NFL level, and that guy, has studied a lot of film over the years. It's why the opinions really have differed top to bottom when it comes to this quarterback class. And I do think it does kind of speak volumes after the fact, looking in the rear view mirror. It seems, at least where the draft slots are, it was Kenny Pickett and 4 other guys.
Right. But in Colbert's mind, he talked about how he didn't know if any of these quarterbacks were going to fall to them, and they all fell way past. And so again, that tells you how highly Colbert seemed to think of this class, where the rest of the NFL was going, we're not going to touch these guys at all.
2 or 3 of these guys, maybe even more, might not be in the league in 3 years from now.
Right. Or they could become starters. I mean, that's
right.
the beauty of it all. So again, it'll be interesting because Colbert and the Steelers are kind of in one camp, rest of the NFL is another camp. History would say the rest of the league is right, but as you said, time will tell. And ultimately, even if the other guys bust, Willis sucks, Corral sucks, if Pickett wins, then that's all that matters.
Simon Short, Connor Heyward / running back. Thank you so much and the whole SD team for the best draft coverage around. He says, I'm going to call my shot and agree with you guys that Connor Heyward will effectively be a running back for this team. He said, and I agree with you guys. Look, I think that Connor Heyward is going to be in a lot of rooms. And I think the running back room is one of the rooms that Connor Heyward is going to be in. I don't think he's going to be specific. I'll be shocked if he's like running back 2. I think you can envision Connor Heyward being a slash guy, meaning, H-back, running back. He could be your running back 3 on some game days and your break glass in case of emergency type of guy. I'm not totally convinced he's going to be, a guy that we're going to see 10 carries a game or anything. I think him even getting 10 snaps a game right now is kind of maybe a ceiling.
Yeah, Heyward, if Heyward's going to last and succeed in this league, it's going to be because he's versatile. If he's pigeonholed into one spot and one role, he's probably not going to have a long NFL career. He's going to have to maximize his value by being able to do a lot of different things, the things we've talked about. So will he carry the ball occasionally? Sure, I think he will. Very occasionally behind Najee Harris, but in training camp, preseason, you'll probably see some more of it. But he'll have to wear a lot of hats. That is where he's going to create his value.
And Simon, I think that's what we were kind of getting at with if Connor Heyward only goes to tight end meetings, I think something's wrong.
Right, and if he's aligned as an inline tight end on every single play, this guy is
very wrong.
That's more on Pittsburgh probably for misusing him, but yeah, that's not going to lead him to having a successful career.
I mean, this is a guy that's going to be in special teams meetings, in the running back rooms, in the tight end room. That's kind of how I envision. Anyway, Simon says in his tape from Michigan State at running back, how is his blocking? Yeah, look, Simon, stay tuned, guys, because we've got a lot of work to do. Tape drill downs on Connor Heyward, the blocker. He says I can envision him on third downs with his pass catching abilities and what I can assume is strong blocking abilities. I think there are some instances, maybe short yardage, maybe deep red zone. Goal to go type situations where you could see him maybe potentially being maybe the only running back in certain situations. Obviously, Najee Harris, what the hell did you draft Najee Harris for in there? But I can envision a snap or 2 that way. But we should not be having talks going forward. Boy, what do you think about Connor Heyward playing 13 snaps as running back?
Right, right. Yeah, my profile, this was a bit more commentary on him as an inline guy, but in the negative, I wrote, gets overwhelmed with inline work in the run and pass game, loses early on, and defenders able to get into his pads because of his lack of height and length. I do think in space and some of those, downfield blocks and screen plays and things like that, he actually was a better blocker out in space. So there's effort,
Okay.
there's 1-2 desires, some size, but working in some more confined spaces is going to be the key for him. And again, as I said before, he didn't really block much until this past year. So he's kind of new to that stuff. And similar in the way that Mark Robinson's new to linebacker. So I think those are things, a specific skill set Heyward needs to and can and will work on.
If you got a 4-year special teams captain leading the team in special teams, tackles, yada, yada, is that enough?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, people take for granted how tough it is to hit on a 6th-round pick. And I'm doing, as I mentioned the other day, the Colbert draft history of it's 176. I had one double counted. So 176 picks Colbert made prior to this year's draft. And the number of 6th-round picks that just did nothing for you. I mean, I can go down some of the list here if you want. I'm trying to pull it up right now. Marvin Phillip, Keith Williams, Travis Feeney, Sonny Harris. That was not a 4th-round pick. Jason Gavodsta. I don't even know who that is. I mean, it's just the names that you totally miss on. Colin Holbrook, a long snapper. So if you get that kind of value out of a 6th-round pick, it's a big win.
Right. I agree. And then, if you get the guys like Tyler Matakevich, that guy held his own, carried his own water, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he was legitimately one of Colbert's better 7th-round picks. Not the best. I mean, Kiesel was better, Beecham was better, but he might have been 3rd. I mean, he was a tremendous selection.
Yeah, once again, if Connor Heyward stays on your roster at least 3 years and holds his own as a special teamer, obviously I would have liked them to go, outside, whatever, but there would be the same less guarantees, with the later you get in these drafts anyway. Ryan Roberts writes in, I think the Steelers did a lot with a little. 5 potential first-year contributors with 7 picks. He gives it a B+, he says. Zach writes in, first of all, thank you for another great coverage. I was watching one of the episodes of The Standard that the Steelers do, and Dan Rooney Jr. mentioned in an interview that they had been looking at quarterback over the last few years as Ben got towards the end. So which quarterback from the last 3 classes would you take in each, and then overall from your 3? So which quarterback from the last 3 classes would you take in each, and then overall from your 3? He's got here listed 2022 Pickett, Willis, Corral, Ritter, Howell. 2021 Lawrence, Fields, Lance, Jones, Wilson. 2020 Burrow, Tua, Herbert, Love, and Hurts. He says, for me, I go Burrow, Fields, and Pickett, and honestly choose Pickett as a hometown guy. I guess what he's wanting us to do is which quarterback would we pick of all these listed of the last 3 quarterback classes? I guess is what he's wanting us to do.
Is he asking though, like based on their present day value or what we thought of them coming out of college? Because that second one would be tough to kind of put that toothpaste back in the tube now that I've watched Burrow and Herbert and those guys play for a couple of years.
Yeah, I don't know what context he's asking it is here, but look, I mean, a lot. If we're talking about a lot of these kids' college tape here, I mean, I didn't go as deep on some of these earlier classes, So
same. Just quick answer, and I'm going to base this off of where they're at today. I'm going to say, and this might be a little controversial, Herbert from the 2020 group. I'll go, and again, it's a little controversial. I'll go Mac Jones from the 21 group, and then Malik Willis was my number 1 quarterback in 2022, so I'll stick with him. So Willis, Mac Jones, and Herbert. I'll take Herbert of the 3.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I assume that's the exercise you want us to do. John, why, boy, this is a long, we're going to probably have to read this one later from John in Fort Myers. Sorry, John, it's just a little bit Friday. Too long. In the meantime, let's wrap it up there. You can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Give out the Twitter handles for Josh and Jonathan Heitritter.
Sure. For Josh Carney, you can follow him on Twitter at @byJoshCarney. And for Jonathan, you can follow him at J_Carney. Heights, Heits.
All right, Alex and I, let's see, if you want to donate to the site, go to SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button as well there. And Alex and I will be back at it on Friday, maybe another roundtable again. We're trying to effort that up as well. So in the meantime, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.